This world has been changing and is changing so rapidly in terms of all different aspects of this control system, the way they manipulate education, manipulate wars, put in the people they want as presidents, give us all this shite through food and drink, control the media, manufacture the global warming scam, big pharma, and 9/11 and all that stuff. And it's coming in such a coordinated way. So if we are going to think that this situation that we're seeing unfold goes back to a few men and women in dark suits or whatever sitting round a table saying, what's our next move? We are clearly massively missing the point. And the vast majority of people who over the last few years have started investigating this, they will not go any further. They will not go any further because, A, their belief systems won't let them, often their religious belief system, but also they are fearing what other people will think about them if they go into some of these areas I'm going to go into now. What people make of it is up to them. My right to say it is up to me. So yes, it's not just people sitting around a table somewhere in the world discussing the next move. There's the level where we see this unfolding in the news and what have you. Then there's this other dimensional, non-human level to look at, as I will in this section. Then there's the level of the nature of reality, which I've introduced already. And then there's this whole stuff about the moon, which I'll get into in this section too. And the rabbit hole doesn't end there. It goes deeper and deeper and deeper. And the deeper you go into the rabbit hole, the more we understand what the game is, the more we can change the game. And it's all about the control and programming of perception. That's the only way the few, and it is a few compared with the global population, that the billions can be controlled. Manipulating how we interact with reality, keeping from us that we are consciousness, putting us in these bubbles of our sense of limitation, and I can't, manipulating the way we decode reality, and therefore making us see the world as the control system wants us to see it. That's the basis of all of it going through the day, because that's the basis of all of it going through the whole conspiracy. So yes, of course, on one level it does manifest as dark suits sitting around a table discussing the next move. But that's still the play-out world of this conspiracy. It's not its origin. It goes beyond them into the advisors in the shadows, the Mandelsons in this country. Peter Mandelson, if he's not manipulating, he gets withdrawal symptoms, that man. And into the Rahm Emanuels, Ditto in America, the controller, handler of Barack Obama. It goes into deeper levels, beyond them, deep in the hidden secret society network. And eventually, it goes out of this dimension. And that's where this whole thing is really coming from. Beyond the frequency range of visible light. And it involves non-human entities. Some of them people call the greys. The main ones, I would say, and have been saying for a long, long time, take a reptilian form. They operate outside. They can come into visible light, but in terms of the reptilian part of this, they can't stay here for that long. So people say, why don't they just come and take over? Because they can't, or they would. They can come for so long, but their vibrational difference, incompatibility, means they have to leave. They can't stay for long, although there are technological ways they can stay for longer. And they operate outside visible light, and they manipulate this reality through bloodlines, interbreeding bloodlines that I'll come to. And we call them the Illuminati families. So, we operate with invisible light, but outside of that, sharing the same space, is infinite other worlds and realities. And if a so-called UFO comes into this reality, because it's coming into visible light from where we cannot decode, it just seems to appear out of flipping nowhere. Because what it's done, it hasn't actually come in, it's just changed its vibrational state to resonate with invisible light, and it's like, it came out of nowhere. And then how often do you see it? Honestly, mate, there was this bloody UFO, and it disappeared just in front of my eyes. What are you on, mate? You on the pop or what? What it's done is increased its vibrational resonance to go beyond on visible light. Therefore, to the observer, it disappears. It doesn't disappear at all. It's left visible light. And this range of frequency we call our world is being manipulated from vibrational frequencies beyond it. And Satanism is a network within visible light that interacts with these reptilian entities in various ways I'll get to before the end of the day. Places or areas of the heavens that come up, Orion comes up again and again in relation to these reptilians. And in terms of non-human visitations, so does the Pleiades, so does, in terms of the reptilians, area of the heavens they call the Draco constellation, which appropriately, coming through the word derivations, brings us draconian. And of course, draconian laws are the Orwellian laws coming in. Very, very appropriate. Sirius is involved as well. So, I won't be able to get into this today, and there's a lot more to know anyway, but so is what happened to Mars, is all involved in this story, how it became the devastated place it was, but it is, but wasn't before. And when I talk about these areas of the heavens, I'm not necessarily talking about those places with invisible light, because just as we are multidimensional, so planets and stars, etc., are multidimensional. And just as a planet might be devastated within visible light, it's not necessarily devastated on other vibrational frequency levels of itself, because the Earth too operates in visible light, but also multi-levels, like everything else. Another major part of this story is that when these reptilian entities started intervening, they manipulated human genetics through interbreeding, not necessarily physical interbreeding, interbreeding through technological methods, and also changing human form by changing the messages, the information, I'll come to this before we finish this section, that the DNA is picking up. And through that, you can change a form by changing the information the DNA is picking up. And it's no accident that humans have massive, fundamental reptilian genetics. This part of the brain, which scientists call the R complex or the reptilian brain, will be very, very important as we go through this second part of the day, because it's fundamental to how human behavior and human perception is manipulated to see the world as we currently see it. This interbreeding is talked about and recorded all across the world in the ancient accounts. Of course, I guess because it's the Bible, the best known is this section from Genesis. There were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came unto the daughters of men, and they bare children to them. The same became mighty men, which were the old men of renown. But that's just the biblical version. Got a frog in my throat, the reptilian going. All across the ancient world, you see similar stories and accounts of this interbreeding. Something else goes parallel with the reptilian story. Again, not just in the Bible with the Garden of Eden and all that stuff, which of course the serpent was dominant, but across the ancient accounts. And that is the connection between the reptilian intervention and what we call the fall of man. And again, this is universal. And these themes will come together again and again as we go through this next part. The ancient accounts, again, we're talking that part of the Yuga cycle, which they call the Golden Age, talk about the fact that there was a time when humans were so unbelievably different to how we are today. They were connected to higher levels of consciousness. They were in this world, but they were certainly not of it. They were capable of incredible feats, and they lived what we would call impossible lengths of time in terms of age. And then there was a sudden change, the fall of man, as it was called.
more ancient than the Mayan kingdoms of Central America, older than ancient Greece, and predating the pharaonic dynasties of Egypt. The Sumerian Empire was formed more than 6,000 years ago, stretching from the Indus Valley region in Pakistan to the capital called Uruk. Sumeria is known as the cradle of civilization. It was here that white-skinned peoples from the Caucasus Mountains spread a worldwide cult of blood ritual and magic to the rest of the world. Two authors, Zechariah Sitchin and the British genius John Marco Allegro, who translated large parts of the Dead Sea Scrolls, studied ancient Sumerian clay tablets, which were discovered at Nineveh in the 1800s. These clay tablets told the history of the Sumerian Empire, an empire which was formed by invading aliens called the Anunnaki. Sumer's original name was Ki-en-Gir, which means the land of the kings with blazing rockets. The Sumerian clay tablets describe the Anunnaki aliens genetically manipulating mankind and creating a hybrid race of alien reptilian humans who became known as the Nephilim. The Nephilim are also known as the Elohim in the Bible. This was a genetically created race of rulers which had their human DNA mixed with that of the invading Anunnaki aliens. References to this race of alien hybrid rulers can be found in ancient texts from around the planet. The Sumerian Empire was the place where Zoroastrian, Hindu, and Judaic religions all began. The hybrid alien-human rulers became known as the Zazumin, Rephaim, and the Anakim. The world's most famous author on the subjects of the occult and human consciousness is David Icke. In his books, The Biggest Secret, Tales from the Time Loop, David Icke reports that blood sacrifice was an important part of ancient cultures in Babylon and also in Central America. In the legends of Babylon, the kingdom of ancient Iraq, which supplanted Sumeria, the drinking of human blood and the sacrifice of children was performed to please the alien gods who had invaded from the stars. The ancient ruling elite believed that drinking human blood allowed them to absorb human DNA from their ancestors. The Vatican continues this ancient blood-drinking ritual to this day, with the symbolic drinking of the blood of Christ. David Icke claims blood-drinking rituals have been performed by members of the royal political elite throughout history. Professor John Mack of Harvard University made a detailed study of people who claimed they had been abducted by aliens. In his book, John Mack studied abductees who said that the grey alien is actually a genetically engineered reptilian who invade planet Earth on a regular basis and collect human DNA as part of a plan to breed an alien-human hybrid race who will serve an extraterrestrial elite. According to Colonel Philip J. Corso, back-engineered alien technology is a jealously guarded secret by the rulers of mankind. The elite use the international network of secret societies to honor and control the government and military officials who work on secret projects for the elite. In fact, the oldest secret society known to mankind was formed in ancient Babylon and is called the Brotherhood of the Snake. The ruling elite of ancient Egypt fashioned their bodies so that they resembled aliens. All over ancient Egypt, serpents, snakes, and reptiles are associated with kingship and power over the human population. New kings had their bodies massaged with a special potion which contained crocodile fat. This was a worldwide cult of the crocodile, a reptilian species which has kept its original form since before dinosaurs walked on land. The crocodile is pictured alongside the Wangina creator spirits of Western Australia. Reptiles have always been associated with a race of hidden masters. Many occult traditions which are related to the birth of Freemasonry speak of the hidden masters. Some occult historians and authors claim that a group of hidden masters control world international Freemasonry. Ancient Masonic texts suggest that these hidden masters are in actual fact alien spirits from another world. Some Masonic texts say that the secrets of how to control and influence society and politics from behind the scenes was passed to the elite of Freemasonry from a race of reptilian aliens who invaded planet Earth and landed in ancient Iraq more than 12,500 years ago.
They were to be, like I say, the middlemen and women operating in visible light for the outside visible light control system. And it's appropriate that the caduceus and the symbol of the medical profession is the DNA, in effect, portrayed as two snakes. Because to these reptilian geneticists who were far, far ahead of where we are in the public arena in terms of genetics and understanding, the DNA is a software program. And so they manipulate it for their own means. And this is crucial to understand the world that we live in. One seriously important aspect to this DNA, this hybrid DNA I'm talking about, is that it has eliminated what we call empathy. The ability to decode the emotion of empathy. Empathy is the fail-safe mechanism of all behavior. If I can empathize with the consequences for others of my actions, that limits and balances my actions. If I have no empathy because I cannot empathize, then there are no limits. There is nothing that won't do. 3,000 dead on 9/11, who cares? Who cares? That's what we're dealing with. And this is vital to get across. If we look at this information on the basis of thinking I wouldn't do that, so they wouldn't do it, then we're going to miss the plot completely. Because that's not like that. No, you wouldn't do it. They would, and have no emotional comeback whatsoever. The reason for the interbreeding, the hybrid, is vibrational compatibility. These hybrids have a greater infusion of reptilian DNA than the general population, although we have a lot. And therefore, the resonance is sympathetic to the resonance of these entities operating just outside visible light. And through this resonant connection, like two radio stations talking to each other, the possessing entity outside of visible light can control the thoughts, actions, perceptions of the intermediary, the demigod. And of course, the theme of possession is as old as history, right up to the present day. We look at these people. All these pictures are by Neil Haig, by the way. Anything that looks like this. Great friend of mine, great artist. And this image symbolizes the fact that he looks at him with invisible light and he sees George Bush. Nothing else. What people don't see, because it's outside the frequency range of their decoding system, is there are entities around these people who are actually controlling these people's thoughts, actions, etc. A number of psychics have said to me around the world how they've seen people walking along the street or wherever, and then they've seen like an ethereal reptilian entity locking into these bottom two chakra points, the emotional level, one of them is, and floating around with them. And this is a kind of a good analogy. You know when there's scientists in a laboratory and they're trying to work with something that they can't touch because it's too dangerous, what they're working with will be in a tank, and they'll put gloves on, which allows them to be outside the tank, but to manipulate inside the tank. Well, that is a very good symbol of what I'm talking about. These Illuminati bloodlines, these hybrid bloodlines, operate like those gloves, operating inside this reality. And Neil symbolizes these Illuminati families with invisible light as this bearded man. Whenever you see him as we go along, that is symbolic of the Illuminati families controlled beyond human sight by these reptilian entities. When the world started to recover from great geological catastrophes, which I'll come to in a second, there were areas of the world that stood out in terms of their abilities and potentials and advancement. These were some of them, and this area is particularly important to the bloodlines I'm talking about. The area that was once called Sumer, thousands of years BC, and became Babylon. This is why Babylon comes up in the writings of these people so often. And it's Mesopotamia, the land between two rivers. They didn't invade Iraq just for oil or just for anything. They didn't invade it for one thing, but multiple things. But one reason they're so obsessed with Iraq is because to these bloodlines in control of the world today, this is a very significant, almost religious piece of land, of historical importance to them. As Sumer and Babylon broke up, these bloodlines started going walkabout. They became the royal families of the world. And what do royal families claim? The right to rule because of the divine right to rule. The Chinese emperors used to claim the right to be emperor because of their genetic connection to the serpent gods. And this is a theme all across the world between the serpent gods and royalty. They became the aristocracy and the royal families, claiming the right to rule because of their DNA. Just down the bloody road from here, we have a head of state in Britain to this day who is only head of state because of her DNA. Head of state because of her DNA. I actually made a complaint, nothing happened to it, but I made a complaint to the Race Relations Commission, or whatever they call it. They said, if you see racism, report it. So I reported the royal family. I thought, well, I mean, you would. You would. Because they go, racism, we must stop racism. All these bloody politicians go, well, get down to Buckingham Palace then. You're saying you can only be head of state, not only if you're bloody white, effectively, but if you only come from the same bloody family. Ridiculous. Anyway, it's always been and it still is. And so these aristocratic and royal families moved on. Eventually, when the people started to rebel against overt royal control dictatorship, these families, some of them stayed in the royal families overtly, and there's still some around, like ours. But these families moved into politics, into banking, into business, and became the dark suit, but they still perceive themselves as royalty, as special because of this genetic connection to the serpent gods. And through the British Empire, the so-called Great British Empire, and the other European empires, as these bloodlines moved up into Europe from the Middle East, etc., they exported these bloodlines all over the world. And we saw them in power in what we call colonization. But there's two types of control. One has a finite life, one can go on forever until it's exposed. The one that has a finite life is a dictatorship that the people under dictatorship can see, touch and taste. Communism, fascism, apartheid. People know where they stand, and eventually, therefore, they will rebel against it because they know what they're dealing with. The greatest form of control is a control you can't see. Prison without the bars. You can't see the bars because you'll just sit there. People do not rebel against not being free when they think they are. And that's the idea of replacing the colony control with another kind of control called freedom. So what happened is, as these colonies, like the United States as it became, etc., and all the others around the world, as they were given independence, what was left out in those countries were the bloodline, under different names, the secret society network that manipulates the bloodline agenda, and those countries have gone on being controlled ever since. But because they have the ability to have a vote every 4 or 5 years, they don't realize they live in a tyranny. And that's how it works, the prison without the bars, and until it's exposed, it'll go on forever. And so these kind of people, especially the Rothschilds, they are major, major players in this. They are the middlemen for the manipulation of this reality from these entities mostly outside of this reality. And what they've created is like a global transnational corporation. What you have with a corporation is you have a headquarters somewhere in the world, and then in each country you have subsidiary companies of that headquarters, that central point. And all the subsidiaries in the world carry out the policy of the central point. Well, what these Illuminati hybrid family networks have done is create exactly the same, but instead of companies, they are secret society networks. So you've got the center of the web in Europe, for historical reasons, at operational level anyway, places like London, not the British government, the secret society centre in London. In Rome is another one, the Roman Church, Rome, and other points in Europe. And then in each country, you have families from the network in those countries whose job it is to run the networks that control that country's business, banking, politics, media, all of it. And so what you have is from this central point in Europe, the center of the web, all these different places and countries all over the world then impose on their country what is being dictated here. And that's why as I travel around the world, I see the same things being introduced in different countries at the same time, overwhelmingly justified by the same excuses. It's all a global network. It can be symbolized too as a web, like I say, with the Rothschilds real close to the spider, and all these different strands on the web are different secret societies, different semi-secret societies, transnational corporations, and all the rest of it. So when you see all these different names of these corporations that dominate the world in so many ways, and the pharmaceutical cartel, and the oil cartel, and all the rest of it, the biotech cartel, they're all different names or different masks on the same one face. And so you have this structure where outside of visible light, you have the reptilian control system, comes down through the Illuminati families, and they control the people in power to push the world in a certain direction. Another way of looking at it here. You see, all these different people, these fight among themselves and all the rest of it, though if it gets out of hand, they get sorted. So these sit on the top of all these different countries. They control these different areas of their societies, and the people are then played off against each other. These buggers don't go to war, they tell these buggers to go to war. And if we stop going to bloody war, game over. But we do. Ridiculous. That's part of becoming conscious.